My name is Mark R. LePage, and you are listening to Entre Architect Podcast, where each week I speak with inspiring, passionate people who share their knowledge and expertise, all to help you build a better business as a small firm entrepreneur architect. Today, I'm excited to welcome Chad Reineke to the podcast. Chad is an architect, an educator, practice leader, and author whose work explores something every architect faces, but we don't often discuss enough: professional judgment. As technology and AI continue to change the way we practice, Chad challenges us to think beyond efficiency and focus on ethics, responsibility, and what it really means to serve our clients. His new book, Rules of Practice: The Ethics of Making Architecture, is a timely reminder that great architecture is about much more than producing drawings. Chad Reineke, welcome to Entre Architect Podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. I'm really excited to be here today. I said I've been on chats with you guys many times before, and great to finally be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. When you first published the book, you started talking about it online. I'm like, Chad, you need to come on the show and share your thoughts here at the Entre Architect Podcast. So here we are. I want to learn all about it. But before we do that, I want to learn more about you. I don't know your background. I don't know your origin story. So when did you discover your passion for architecture, and who or what inspired you to get started?
So my route into architecture was probably less direct than some. I came through drafting and carpentry before becoming an architect. And then after going through that, I went into teaching, project delivery. I've been a BIM manager at many different places, now into technical leadership and going into practice management. Across all those roles, I kept noticing the same thing. Decisions that affect projects are rarely presented as dramatic ethical questions. They appeared as ordinary decisions about scope, fees, schedules, coordination, code interpretation, budgets and staffing, or what we were willing to let leave the office. Then usually we tend to discuss ethics as, legal or something dramatic or being something dishonest, when most of our ethics as architects occur in those everyday decisions that we just talked about, mentioned before, is how we affect that. I was able to learn that through all the different stuff that I've gone through and done. A lot of my career has been in hospitality and multifamily. So you guys have heard me make the jokes going on that most of the ugly buildings you see in Atlanta, apartment buildings, I probably did. So that's where it leads into giving me this information coming through this. I started out in the Midwest at Bowling Green State University. This was before the program was accredited. So they were working through the accreditation process at that time. While I was there, we focused on those technical aspects of what makes you a competent architect, what allows you, to quote the professors there going through a ton of it, is we want you to do your job, be able to do your job. That's what you're being released out there for. Moving from that, recession hit. I came down south with just about everybody else from the Midwest and attended a school here. It used to be called Southern Polytechnic. It's now part of Kennesaw State University. And I got to, for lack of a better word, restart architecture school again. So I went to architecture school for about 10 years, and I do not have a PhD in it. So it took the long route. Going through that, I had a lot more time to sit back and regurgitate stuff and go back through it and look through how we actually function as architects and what we need to do. And there's a lot of information and a lot of things that are out there that just aren't explained. They're hidden knowledge is the word I've used a lot. It's not the great term for it, but it's kind of what it is. It's stuff that young architects need to know, should know, to be able to do their job. And that's kind of where the book comes into it, where that came out. We can go into the origin story of the book when you're ready for it, because that's a great story.
What's your role today?
So my role today right now is I am COO of Lightroom Studios. That's lightroom.tv. What that firm does is we do research projects, book publishing, high-end residential, and we dabble in light commercial. So we try to take high theoretical stuff and pull it into some commercial stuff. Like I have a restaurant that's getting permitted right now. And then on the other end of that, this is where it gets crazy. I am a architect of record and a senior project architect at Nelson Worldwide in their hospitality practice. So we do.
So 2 roles.
Yep. So we do big resorts, big hotels, and boutique work like that. And those 2 roles of being able to look at that from the different scales of things really brings a lot more context into it. Because the Lightroom role, I'm everything. I'm the full food chain. Half the time I'm drafting. I have staff, but half the time I'm drafting with them. On the other end, on the Nelson role, I'm the top of the food chain in our studio. So I'm reviewing, answering questions, getting yelled at by my assistants constantly to get out of the Revit model. So it's going through steps in that way. The other thing that builds into this is I'm 43. So I am that unique age condition that I came out a little bit before the 2008, 2009 recession and stayed in the industry through that. So to use the housing term, the missing middle, I'm the missing middle architect. So that kind of grasps a little bit and gets to feed into a lot of the stuff going through with it.
Yeah.
With how it helps with getting this stuff out.
The book is called Rules of Practice. What inspired the book?
So that's going into the story. So I was working at Meticulous at the time as their BIM manager, and I was leading their training as well. They are kind of quasi-semi-affiliated with Ball State. So they get a lot of graduates right out of school. So I'm working with these kids. I say kids, they're 22, 23 years old, but they're right out of school. This is the first job they've had. And I'm trying to bring them up to speed to function as an architect and staff. Well, there's a lot they just don't know. And it's not necessarily based on stuff that they don't know because school didn't teach it, because this is stuff school doesn't teach. A lot of schools don't teach how you function as an architect in a firm. So I'm going through all this stuff, teaching with, working with them. I did that for 3 years, going through it. And I'm like, you know what? I really need to start writing this down. So I was writing it all down. The book goes into helping you how to fill out a BIM execution plan. That's the kind of level we go into it. Going into it is this is to do your job. I started writing all that down, and it's essentially just, how to be an architect, what an architect does on a daily basis. It was 400 pages, and it was 26 chapters.
So an operations manual.
Essentially, yeah, it was like an operations manual. My mentor, which was also the firm owner of Lightroom, Dr. Bill Carpenter, he's wrote 6 books. So he has writing contracts everywhere. He gave me the contact information for Routledge. So I sent all 400 pages to Routledge. And they sit with it, and I think it took them like a month. And one of the editors emails me back, because they're in England, and goes, so we like your topic, we like your subject, this is way too much. And Lydia goes through and she breaks it down, and she takes 12 of the chapters, and I get 2 columns. So she takes 12 of the chapters and goes, we don't want these chapters. She goes, we'll keep these ones, but we don't want these ones. So I was talking through her through that and go, well, the 12 you didn't want, what's the problem? Where don't they fit? And she goes, well, they're just a little more touchy-feely and theoretical than what we're looking for. She goes, but they're all coherent. They all make sense. She goes, if you could weave them together, she goes, you could make another book out of them. She goes, just Routledge isn't going to publish that one, but you could. So that's where Rules came from. Rules is those 12 chapters that Routledge didn't want. And the reason when I say they didn't want them is it just didn't fit with the other 14 chapters.
Right. You had written 2 books.
I'd accidentally written 2 books. Where Rules comes into it, really, it's much more if you're a young architect, a student, even if the case of you're, in the middle of your career and you're just kind of sitting there going, okay, well, where should I be going with this? What should I be doing? Even so much to, if seasoned principal in a firm, just looking back on it to kind of ground, get a little bit of support that, hey, we've been doing this, or maybe we might want to do things this way. The reason it's called rules is because it's very grounded. Well, there's a chapter in it that has 10 rules kind of into it. It's grounded in really how we should be practicing and what we should do. So it is literally, on my aspect, kind of the idea of the rules. It's the guidelines. If you want to have a career that is much more formulated like the architects of old, and what I mean by architect of old is like Mies, Kahn, Sullivan, those guys going into it, to where their message and their work mirrored how they lived. So it's a little bit less separated and jointed because, as you know, most architects, their personality is they're an architect.
Right.
So this is kind of an idea of going through it, of how you can marry all that back together and kind of feel good with it. And that comes from that production is not our value. Our value is to be able to use a set of skills that we were taught to do, problem solvers, to be able to look at unique issues and unique problems and solve them beyond the immediate need. And that's really where our value as architects are. It's not in production. We've got lost in the idea of it as how fast you can produce drawings with as little RFIs as possible and that kind of stuff going through with that. But that's not where our value is. And AI kind of is helping us. It's giving us a very unique opportunity right now to be able to take a step back and possibly readdress that again. That the derogatory term, I heard it, I get to use it because I lived through the time of it, is CAD monkeys.
Right.
We're not CAD monkeys. That's, going through with it. Yeah, that's how the bill gets paid. We're Dunder Mifflin. We sell paper. We just so happen to put instructions on the sheet of paper. We have a great ability right now that we can readjust that back to judgment being our value of architects. And that's essentially what the book's about going into it, and how to get to that and how to do that without burning yourself out.
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit deeper into judgment. You talk about and write about judgment rather than process. Could you explain that? What do you mean by that?
So what I mean by judgment and going into that is when we come across a problem and what we are intentionally supposed to do, and this is unsaid of why clients hire us, is clients hire us to prevent problems. And some of that requires sitting back and making a judgment, making a thought process behind it. It'd be really easy anytime you can just, client, well, what do you want to do? They give you the answer and you do that. Well, that might not work. And what I mean by work is we're going through that is that may immediately solve what they think their problem is, but that might not actually be their problem, and you might have to push back. So one of the ones I get to use a lot that I use is industrial work, going through that when I was doing industrial facilities. Every industrial facility I did, the very first thing we did was we put in a variance for parking reduction. And that's because, as you guys have seen it, everyone's seen it, every factory has a massive sea of parking lot out in front, and a third of it's filled.
Right.
So being able to come back and explain that to the client that, hey, your first year out, we're going to only ask for 1/3 of your parking. We're going to ask for that variance. Oh, but we won't have enough parking. No, but you're going to have a field out in front of your lot that if you need more parking, we can put in more parking when you need it. In the meantime, your rainwater reduction is going to be lower. We're going to design the whole project like you're having this massive sea of parking lot out in front, but you're not going to pave the whole thing. It's explaining those kind of judgment cases like that. Better one that I get a great joke about all the time is when you have a ledge up overhead, is just putting a slant on it. Now, we all think about that and it's a minor little move going through with it, but that's for cleaning staff. That's so dust doesn't build up, so it rolls off.
Right. Yep.
To me, and it might have been from my education going through with it, that's architecture. Like that use, the final use of the people that are occupying the building and how they're going to function in it, and the future need of it going vast beyond it, is architecture. That's the judgment that we're hired to make and to put into that, because clients don't have that. That's not what they do. They're looking at a very specific niche niche use at that point in time. They're not the cleaning staff. They're not the maintenance staff. Sometimes they're not even the visitor coming through with it. They're usually the operator. Sometimes they're not even that. Sometimes they're just, I want a building. Okay, well, there's more things that impact your project than just that. And that's using that judgment to go through with that, which is what we're trained into it. And that's where it kind of goes into it when we say ethics. It's not the legal ethical term, but taking all that thought process into it and thinking through with it is the ethics of what we do. I mean, that is what defines someone as a good architect. Now, when you can do all those things and make tremendously beautiful buildings, that makes you a great architect. That makes you a great designer. But the whole thought process of back to it is having that judgment is ethically what people expect out of us and is kind of the core of what we need to do.
How do you communicate that, right? If judgment is our strength, right, and our value as architects, how do we communicate that to the rest of the world, that that's why architects are important and are valuable?
Well, that's the uphill battle we're fighting right now. The first step into it, so we have the AIA's executive director down here in Atlanta makes a quote, and I can't remember where he got it from, but he makes a comment that every committee should have an architect on it, especially every government board or committee should have an architect on it. And that's part of being able to showcase that, is showing, hey, I'm not just thinking about this, I'm thinking about this altogether. The other case of it is when we get a client to educate the client of that I'm not just looking to do your building, I'm looking to make sure your building has a life, that it has an extension, that, we're not going to come back in 5 years and have to tear half of it down. Now, if we have to renovate to make it bigger because, hey, great, now we got more money, we can make it bigger, great, let's do that. But it's trying to think long term beyond that. So it's kind of separating us out between us and being developers, not so much the word, but the GC. We're not looking at it as just a job. It's this building, we'll get it done, we'll go on to the next. It's how this building, how this project is going to impact the community, impact where we are, impact itself, going through with that, which is why I'm trying to get the book out and trying to get that out. The younger you can get that mindset and thought process into it, the better it'll be, the easier it'll be. But the next step is going into it. The greatest argument that I have with AI and all that stuff coming into it is we're fighting the case of AI can produce faster, let's shorten schedule.
Yeah.
No, let's not shorten the schedule. Let's keep the same schedule. Let's use AI to produce better projects in that same schedule. As that starts to happen and goes through, we'll start to see again to where our influence starts to shift to that judgment and that decision making rather than our production. I mean, it's a natural kind of flow with it. It will start happening. We just have to push back on the market trying to make things faster and shorter throughout that.
And that's why judgment is so important to be communicated as our value, because as AI continues to do more of the work that we used to do as architects in terms of the production side, that value of judgment is is our strength, is the thing that we're selling, is that we're able.
Where we're going to stay alive. That's where we're going to get through with it, is because, so here's the thing going through with it. I've done a bunch of commentary for Common Edge about AI going through it. And this is why we're kind of leaning on this. And AI works as a natural.
Common Edge is an online magazine.
Yes. It's Common Edge's online magazine. This is a natural kind of inflection point to where we're at, which is also why the book has been written now. We're at this nice inflection point. We are going to start to see a lot of smaller firms that have embraced using AI for production,
yes,
start to land much bigger jobs. like ones that we have historically seen gone to like Gensler and HKS and HOK. We're going to start to see smaller firms that are getting that because they're using AI to get over the production hump. Where we need to keep in our own case of it going through with that. And our value has always been decision. It's always been judgment. We just kind of let that fall to the wayside when, Revit, AutoCAD and all that going on. Oh, we can produce faster than so-and-so.
Right. It's easier to sell deliverables than it is to sell judgment.
Yeah, it's easier to sell deliverables than it is to sell judgment. However, deliverables last for a year, 2 years. Your judgment and your decisions that you made in your buildings last much longer. The case in New York right now is a great example of it. Earlier this week, I'm sure just about every architect in the United States was watching that and going, yep, so that building's going to fall down today.
Yeah, explain for the future listeners what the issue is.
Yeah. So there's a building in New York right now that the 32nd floor started to collapse. It was on CNN and going through with it. Now, they haven't exactly came out and said why.
Yeah, the vertical structure is buckling.
Well, there was somebody made a decision in that.
There was some judgment made.
Made at some point in that to where I'm going to guess we're going to find out later on that there was a structural engineer, because they always push back, that pushed back on the owner and said, well, this needs to be bigger. And the owner probably goes, well, no, I think we'll be okay with this. Or they were renovating because that's what they were doing when they came across the buckle. And they took out a column or a couple columns. They're like, oh, this will hold until we get a bigger beam in here or what's going through it. There was some judgments made in that were probably a little riskier than they should have been. So granted, everybody are stars. The building is not becoming several inches shorter each minute, even though I think at one point it was becoming feet shorter each minute. But that's the case of that. There was judgment made with that. Sometimes you got to push back. You are not going to be measured on how many, and this is as an architect, you're not going to be measured on how many dollars you made. I mean, the great case of it is few people know this. Michael Graves was the richest, most grossing architect alive. Well, when he was alive, but so far.
Yeah.
And he did that by selling Target products. But that's not how we remember him. We remember him based on his, the Disney buildings and the Children's Hospital. That we remember him based on the judgment and the designs that he made. The same thing going through with it with Mies and Kahn and all that stuff. We don't remember them based on how many projects they did. We remember them based on the projects that they did. And all of those, Mies notorious for it, had an opinion and made a judgment on everything. There was nothing that went into his projects that he did not have a look through, a decision, or a concept or some discussion on it. That is those judgments and those ethics going into it. Now, where it weighs into it and weighs into the ethics is we have budgets. We have things that weigh against that. So that's where all of this stuff coming into it goes into what we do. And most people or most young staff don't even know budgets exist until they're halfway through their career. And then it's all of a sudden, wait, I have to design this in how many hours? Well, before we just designed it. What do you mean you designed this in 80 hours? I mean, that would be actually, from some of the stuff we see, that's a long design process if you get 2 weeks to go through it. But that weighs into it even more. You need to put thought process into this. Sometimes you have to slow down and look at what you're doing before you start moving forward. And that's to know the direction that you're going rather than just going and the thought process into it. And again, we use the word judgment a lot because that's the easiest way to do it. But it's really in just what we do under the hood on a daily basis.
Well, let's take a quick break to say thank you to our sponsors for their support of this episode. This episode of Entre Architect Podcast is sponsored by ARCAT. If you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you've heard me talk about the importance of building systems that save time and reduce friction in your practice. That's exactly why I recommend ARCAT. When I need product information or specifications, CAD details, BIM objects, or sustainability documentation, I don't want to hunt through dozens of manufacturer websites or fill out forms just to download a file. With ARCAT, I can find what I need fast, and everything is free to access. No subscription, no paywall. In fact, you don't even need to register with your email address. Just go to arcat.com, search for the product information you need, and get back to serving your clients. Thousands of architects use ARCAT every day because it simply makes work easier. Visit arcat.com and see why. That's ARCAT, ARCAT.com. How do we make sure that future architects are learning this at schools and emerging architects are learning this in practice? How do we make sure that as the profession evolves with AI, which is rapidly transforming, how do we make sure that the next generation of architects understands their value?
So we're teeing that up. It's going to be a great one is you can buy my book and put it into curriculum. I've had a couple universities do that already. No, you don't have to.
Just again, rules of practice, the ethics of making architecture. We'll have a link to it in our show notes.
I got to make those plugs and those jokes when I get the chance to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's one of the answers, right? Is to make sure that everybody understands it, teaches it.
Teach it and read the book. The next step into that is taking a step back from how we've previously taught design. We're coming into a case with AI that production, the pretty picture, the great design is, I'm not going to say it's easier to come to, because a good one is not.
Yeah.
A good one still requires the same amount of time and effort going into it. It is easier to fake one now. With the ability to use AI to generate thousands of concepts, and then you just look and you pick one. Okay, I like this one. I'm going to go with this. Makes getting to a good design faster. However, again, we're at an inflection point to where this is doing this is, I've heard it phrased a couple different ways. I think I used the race to competency last. The return to competency, race to competency. Before we kind of came up with the design Starchitect, the goal of every architect coming out of school was, how fast can I get to being a competent architect? To where I can feel that I am comfortable doing my job. And then if I'm a great designer, that'll show. That'll come out of it. But the first step is how fast can I get to being good at what I do? We're coming back to that. And it's kind of encouraging that a little bit more. So when you have that great design in school, it's the simple question. That's beautiful. That looks great. How does that work? How does the guest, how does the client interact with that? It's going back to asking those questions again through school. That it's not just about a pretty design. It's, how do we interact with that? Next, if we interact with that, how do we build that? How do we do that? And it's rephrasing those kind of questions into that, which will slowly build and just kind of think that up. Great example I had with one of my professors going through it is, I'm notorious for doing the rectangular building. And I had a professor one time at OSS school, why is it a rectangle? Well, it's a rectangle because that's one, the easiest resistance to forces. Next, it's the easiest to build, and it's a shape that people are extremely comfortable with. Anybody else would have got that question, they would have clamored, design-wise, their heads just exploded. But usually I'd give that one out, and then it would rephrase back to, well, I think, or I feel, or I would have done this. It shuts the question down, because that's the judgment and thought. I have the answer to it. Why is it a rectangle? Because that handles the loads the easiest. The proportions work out that way. The rooms, works. I had a professor, someone drew a circular room, and he'd go in and start drawing square furniture in. And he'd go, how does this fit in the room? It doesn't. So that's the kind of stuff going into it. And I'm not saying we can't do crazy designs and that. You can go through it. You just have to ask the questions to push it past just that's a pretty design. Okay, it's pretty designed. How does it work?
Often when we start talking about AI on the show, I ask a question about the future and what the guest thinks the future will look like in the near future, 3 years from now, because next year is going to look rapidly different and extremely different than this year. And 3 years from now, it's going to be a completely different world. But actually, I want to push you even farther.
Yeah.
Let's go a decade. Like, what does the profession look like in your mind 10 years from now?
So first I'll make the Simpsons joke because I would like to welcome our computer overlords and state how graciously I am to still be existing with them.
That was a good move.
So thank the computers. Thank it as much as you can. It remembers. What I see happening, so I have a good friend of mine. He was one of my studio classmates, Patrick Chopson from Cove. I think you've talked before.
Yes.
He's been working on, and he has, and you'll see all over his stuff, a great AI architectural software. Now, they wrote it from the ground up. They completely dismantled it, rebuilt it. It is probably one of the most advanced right now. But Patrick will be the first one to make the comment to you that if you just let it go on its own, it will design for you the ugliest building in the world. It'll meet code 100%. It'll kind of meet your program, but it'll be absolutely hideous. That is because even as we develop AI and get through more and more of it, it doesn't really do judgment. It doesn't understand nuance. It's a calculation. Everything into it, it's only as good as the database that's there or the interpretation of it is. So the example that we have right now is like chat and all that are large language models. So a lot of people don't understand that all it's doing is it's taking every word that you type in, pulling its definition, and then reassembling an answer from you from its definitions.
One word at a time.
One word at a time. So it's going back to a database. Well, that's great. Yeah, some buildings we can copy and paste to move into other places. Clearly not that many, otherwise we wouldn't have much of a career. So there's little pieces, little nuances to every site and every project that go through it. Now, what I would like to see and what I think we're going to see is AI is going to work in the industry a lot like Revit did. Is the original purpose of Revit was that a competent, experienced architect could do an entire project themselves. Now, Revit couldn't quite get there. It tried, but it couldn't quite get there. I think what we're eventually going to see with AI, maybe in like a decade going into it, is that, yeah, as an architect, you can do a sketch or however you want to call a sketch, whether you're drawing it in CAD or whatever, or a basic model and that, and you'll be able to load it into something that will be able to produce, I'm going to do air quotes on this one, drawings and CDs. So that rough grunt drafting is going to get greatly diminished. However, you're going to have to still check those drawings. You're still going to have to put the human aspect of it and look at them and go, is this doing what we want it to do? Does this explain this? A human is going to end up reading these at some point in time, not another computer. Well, then that's even the better story right now in AI when you get two AIs to talk to each other.
It's pretty funny.
Watching them argue over the way they interpret stuff. And that's because they're trying to emulate us. That's why it happens and goes through that. But that's what we forget going through with it is our drawings are open to interpretation. Now, what's going to be interesting to see over the next 10 years is when that early entry level stuff kind of starts to get eaten up into AI more and more, is how we're going to train younger staff. Because, that's the way I was trained. I was given a stack of drawings that big because I started out doing industrial factories and warehouses. So I'd get a set of drawings about this big, all of them redlined. And my PA would say, when you get done through those, I'll have another stack for you. And we're just going to keep doing them. And you kind of sit there and go, well, when will we be done? And John used to go, well, either when I quit finding stuff to redline or we run out of budget, whichever happens first.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll eventually, as he used to say, is you'll eventually start to figure out what I'm going to redline before I redline it, and you'll stop. So how we're going to educate that into it, I'm not entirely sure yet. That might be a third book. I don't know. That's going to be experiment building into it to kind of figure out as that develops going through with it. Personally, when I take off my educator and my future forward seeing hat and put on my CEO hat, the idea of being able to dimension plans, click on a button with a computer sounds amazing. When I'm 65, 70 and looking for someone else to take over the firm, I don't know what I'm going to do. That'll be a problem for then. So, I mean, that'll be interesting coming through with it. And it'll be really more of a thought to how we train younger staff than how the work gets done. So we're kind of working ourselves out of a job isn't exactly the best word, because the architects that already exist will have to keep existing. It's how do we train ourselves back into a profession?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thought. We'll have to figure that one out.
So that one will be, the thought with that, but that leads into what the book is, and what we're talking about here is kind of focusing back on it, that we train for that judgment rather than, like I took probably 2 or 3 years worth of CAD classes. Be great. We don't have to do those classes anymore. Okay, well, let's teach classes on how to work through a problem.
Yeah, I agree. All right, final question. What's one thing a small firm architect can do today to build a better business for tomorrow?
So to build a better business for tomorrow is the first part, as I said, push it all through it, that your client is not paying for production. They're paying for your judgment and your decision-making abilities to make their life simpler. That's the idea of it. They are not experts at building. We are. That's why we're here to help out with that. The next step of it, and going into this, because I've had this going through, you don't have to be afraid of AI. AI is not going to replace architects. We're still going to be there. We're still going to have to do stuff. We might have to shift a little bit of how we do it, but we're still going to be part of this conversation and still be with it. We're going to have to fight for it and push for it a little bit, but we'll be there and be able to do it. If we let it go, yeah, we're going to lose some of it.
That's the key.
Is remaining there with it.
Yeah, we have to embrace it and be the leaders of it, or else somebody else will.
Somebody else will, and I can tell you the contractors are not behind it. Bless them all. I love my contractors that I work with them. If they could get me out of the picture, they probably would in a heartbeat. So we have to stay with it. We have to go through it. That they're not bad people. It's just they're looking at things from a different view than we are.
Right. His name is Chad D. Reineke. The firm is Lightroom Studio, lightroom.tv. You can learn more about them there. The book is called Rules of Practice, The Ethics of Making Architecture. You can buy it on Amazon, and we will have a link to that book in the show notes. So just go to the show notes for this episode, and we will have a link to Rules of Practice. Chad, thank you for writing the book. There's also another book. You talked about it earlier. It's called The Reflective Architect.
Yep. That is coming out through Routledge in November, they've said right now. That book takes a lot of the concepts that began in Rules and actually puts a little more concrete to them.
Yeah, and we'll have you back. When that's ready, let me know, and we'll come back and talk about The Reflective Architect. This one again, Rules of Practice, The Ethics of Making Architecture. Get it on Amazon. Chad, thank you for writing these books. Thank you for spending the time and the effort and the care to do that, because, you don't have to do that, right? And it's making the profession a better profession. It's helping direct us in where we need to go and focus on the things that we should be focusing on at this critical juncture in our profession. So thank you for doing that and for coming by here and sharing your knowledge at Entre Architect Podcast.
No, super excited. Again, thank you for having me on. I've said most of the people here in the podcast have heard my voice before. So it's really exciting to be on the podcast and get to do this with you.
All right, great. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of Entre Architect Podcast, please share a link with a friend, because that's how we've continued to grow and serve thousands more small firm architects just like you. Thank you to our sponsors for this episode, Links to the sponsors and all the resources we discussed today, they are all available in the show notes for this episode at entrearchitect.com/podcast. Entre Architect is a proud member of the Gable Media Network. It's the multimedia network moving the architecture, engineering, and construction industries forward through the power of storytelling. You can earn AIA continuing education credits by listening to select episodes of this podcast and many others at gablemedia.com/members. And if you are a small firm architect, listen up. Join us today at Entre Architect Network. It's the worldwide community for entrepreneur architects. We've been around since 2012, and our basic level is now free to join. Yes, you can join Entre Architect Network for free. And that gives you access to valuable business resources and our global community of architects. And you can upgrade anytime for live coaching, AIA-approved training, and mastermind support. So visit entrearchitect.com to learn more and to get started. My name is Mark R. LePage. Thank you for listening to the Entre Architect podcast. Love, learn, share.